Welcome to the Humans of Hospitality podcast. I know so many of you listening to this show love your local bar, your local restaurant, maybe your local hotel, and have so many fond memories of time in hospitality businesses. This is the podcast where we get to chat to the human beings behind the scenes of that industry. Maybe the chefs or the bakers or the coffee roasters or the gin distillers or the craft brewers or the entrepreneurs, but all doing an amazing job of making sure that hospitality stays interesting and the big, dull, formulaic brands do not take over our high street. Please enjoy the show. Welcome to this week's episode where I am chatting with Joe Lovett from Bad Hand Coffee, a cracking coffee roastery down in Bournemouth on the south coast of the UK. And this conversation very much goes in two halves, really. The first half is very much about Joe's journey and his story, why an abandoned stable, brothel and crack den became the perfect home for his coffee roasters. We go off on a bit of a tangent around going plant-powered and the impact that's had on running and recovery. A little conversation around low-commitment dining and what that even means, and why Bad Hand is a terrible name, but way better than a roast dinner. And in the second half, we go a little bit more industry specific. Joe nails the whole reason for this podcast being in his great description of why where we spend our money is so important. And we touch on the financial challenges of hospitality and cafes and going in with your eyes wide open. Okay, I very much hope you enjoy our conversation. So, Joe, thank you so much for sparing the time. It's a super busy time of the year. I know, just coming up to Christmas in our world, but thank you for sparing the time. How are you?
Good, man. Pleasure to be here. Yeah.
Cool, good. Can you just set the scene? You have literally the coolest office. I think mine's pretty cool because it overlooks the ocean, but yours is this kind of crazy building you've ended up. Can you just explain where we are, how long you've been here, a little bit about it?
Well, this is a abandoned stables and workhouses, I think, from the Victorian era. That was, I think, part of the, I may be wrong on this, stuff I've heard is it's part of the Ives estate, which was part of the very early parts of Bournemouth.
Right.
And this would have been the workshops for it. So it's now in a really rundown area of the triangle. It's when we moved in, we had a brothel opposite. We had drug deals going on outside all the time, but actually the area's getting nicer all the time.
By saying it's in a stables, it makes it sound like we're out in the country somewhere, doesn't it? We are literally in the heart and the town centre.
Right, slap bang in the centre of the town, which is kind of where we wanted to take roasting coffee, was back into, so not out on industrial estates. And roasting coffee had got very few roasters, roasting very big scale, lots of white label stuff. And it'd been taken away from the early days when it was a roaster in every town. And what I loved about Australia and New Zealand is there's two roasters in most towns. And then you drink the coffee you like. You like this roaster or you like that roaster. You go to this cafe because they serve the coffee you like. So I grew up in a town where there was a coffee roaster. I moved to another town, there was a coffee roaster. Neither town has roasters in now.
Where was this in?
So originally in Devon, there was a little coffee roaster where we lived. And then when I moved to Lymington, there was a Simon Hayes tea and coffee shop, and he used to roast every weekend. And you'd smell that. And so roasting in the town centre was really important to me. Find somewhere that's actually in the town centre, not an industrial estate. So.
Yeah, similar to the craft beer thing then, when there used to be craft brewers everywhere, same way they disappeared, and it happened with the roasteries as well, did they? Just sort of disappeared.
I put a lot of it down to the financial crash, 2008, I think actually helped because it wiped out a lot of the very homogenised high street shops. You know, there was tons and tons of chain shops. It was as an independent, when we opened our first cafe, it was incredibly hard to get in a venue. Most places were empty and we'd start negotiating. They're like, oh, we've never run a place before. No. And they just didn't even want to talk to us because they knew they'd get a big corporate come in. When everything got empty and went empty for ages, then the high street had to rethink itself. And suddenly you're getting things that can't trade on the internet. So it's, barbers in a big way, cafes in a big way, all those things start coming back. And then you start to see a resurgence in handcrafting things, of people brewing beer, roasting coffee. All these skills started coming back. People started thinking differently. So there's definitely been that huge resurgence. And I feel like, bringing coffee roasting back into a town just sits in nicely with that. It's what should be happening in the town. And I think it's the future, making high streets more, or town centres, more viable places and nicer places to live, rather than just looking at everything that you could just buy online. Which
Yeah, nice. Okay. We'll come back to that because I think where the high street's going and the downfall of retail and whether realistically hospitality can fulfill that kind of space. We'll come back to that a little bit later. But just staying on this space then. So when you moved in, it wasn't a barn at the time, but it was pretty run down.
2 years ago, it had been a tyre garage, but from the evidence here, it was more of a brothel and crack den from upstairs. We ripped out a lot of drug growing equipment from the upper decks in this place.
Great selling point.
And I think it'd just been owned by a developer who wanted to knock it down, put 28 flats on. To be fair to the council, they were brilliant. They wouldn't let him put 28 one-bed flats. They wanted 2-bed flats because it's better for people in the town centre. It's more, you can have families live there, or it's cheaper for people. It's very expensive to live on your own. So that made the development unworthwhile. And then they wanted a car parking space for each flat. Again, another good thing for the council to promote. So as a development opportunity, it was kind of dead. So he'd been letting it go to rack and ruin, but eventually he'd given up on developing it. So sold it. Yeah.
Right. And you saw it and went, oh, that's perfect. Yeah, that's absolutely ideal.
I loved it. I fell in love with it.
It had no
Stick
roof.
at the dump.
Yeah, hardly any walls.
Caving in everywhere. Yeah, it was so full of junk. It took us, I think, 8 to 12 weeks just to empty it. Just loading skips, 30 tons we ripped out of just junk. Not even, and I'm good at salvaging fun stuff. I don't think I even filled a bucket with anything that was worth keeping. It was literally just junk. Just squat junk, drug junk, car junk, all sorts of junk. Excellent. It was, yeah, it was good to get it. I actually brought a developer friend of mine round when we were trying to finance it. And a big motivation for moving here was to own our own place and not be in the pockets of a landlord anymore. Although we had good experiences with landlords, we also had bad experiences with landlords along the way, leaseholds. And what I most found was just very slow to get anything done. If we wanted to make any adjustments, it was years before we could get an okay to do something. And we like to move more quickly than that. So wanted to be our own landlords. So I brought a developer friend round with an idea that, he'd love this place. Yeah, he might want to get involved to do it as a partnership or something. And he just came round and said, no one in their right minds. He goes, you're going to get this for a steal because literally no idiot is going to want to touch that place.
Excellent.
I might just be that idiot.
Perfect. But what you've done with it is incredible. Although, we're sat in a room, I don't know, what was this? It's kind of got old tiled walls and a big hearth on.
This absolutely would have been a stable that... So the flooring sort of gives it away and the drain going down through the middle, and then the glazed bricks, you can see the hoof marks all around the bottom. Wow. So I think this possibly would have been fire station, so that when they were horse drawn. So there's a natural spring just up here and the horses would have been loaded up hills so they can get a run up down the hill and we're up a hill. So it's likely this would have been for the estate, would have been like a little fire station or bridlery in this room.
Okay.
Since there's been a bakery, there's some recipes and bakery stuff written on the wall over there that we can't scrub off.
Amazing.
So this room's been a few things.
Yeah. So it does aid your coffee looking even cooler than it is, but it's not just coffee here. You've kind of split the space, is that right? And use it for lots of stuff? Or?
Yeah. So bit by bit, the idea is to renovate. The building's way too big for us. So the idea is to renovate the whole building as sympathetically as we can. So keep it looking pretty rustic, pretty cool, not too corporate, not too polished. And then sublet spaces to small startup businesses. So businesses that are only in their first year or so or just starting from scratch. Flexible leases, no rent deposits. Just make it as easy as possible. If someone got an idea and wants to give it a go, we can work with you as easy as possible. So We've got 4 tenants so far. We've got another one coming next year, and we've still got about 30 to 40% of the building still to do up and rent out.
Amazing. And what sort of stuff are they doing?
So it sounds like Hipster's Paradise, which actually we're thinking of running an event called Hipster's Paradise because it's become a bit of a joke. But we've got obviously our roasteries in here. We've then got a couple called Jim and Cara who have started a company, Green Label Chef, which is all vegan catering. So they supply several businesses around the area that want better vegan products. They also do catering and functions and stuff, and they're looking at maybe bringing out a line of produce they could sell. They're sort of growing. Jim was a chef for us before, although a chef at loads of places his whole life. And his wife, Cara, had started running Cara's Vegan Supper Club, which is a pop-up night that was doing really well. And they both worked for other people their whole lives and wanted to take a plunge. So Amazing. They've taken some kitchen space.
Yeah, Cara used to work with me actually a few years ago.
Did you? She did, didn't she?
Yeah, they're good. Yeah. They're good. Yeah, and lovely
She's
food.
always worked for us on and off, like whilst working other jobs and stuff ever since we opened Boston Over, and she's a hard worker. Yeah. And then Jim was a friend of mine from college days and came to work for us at Boston Over, and he'd had enough of getting his ass kicked in restaurants and bad hours, never seeing his kids. Came and worked at Boston Over, and they, to be fair, they did a cracking job. They both loved it. He transformed the kitchen. And when it was time for us to sell the cafe, I think Jim felt it was time for him to try his hand, do his own thing for a bit as well. So
amazing.
Yeah, they're in their early days, doing well.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and such a huge growth in the last 18 months, particularly, I think, around the whole plant-powered food stuff. We've noticed it in our restaurants.
It's still
just
incredibly
huge.
niche, but it's in such a growth area.
Growth
it's fantastic.
is phenomenal. Yeah, it really is. Yeah,
it's a good movement as well. I'm not vegan myself, but I really respect people who are, or just people who choose to eat vegan. Like myself, I eat vegan 80% of the time. So I eat plant-based. I'm not vegan by any means. I still love a good steak.
Yeah.
But I just try and eat massively less meat, like once a week, twice a week max.
Yeah, same. I actually about 10 months ago stopped eating meat and went pretty much 100% whole food plant-based.
Yeah.
Unless I'm traveling. So I was in Morocco a couple of weeks ago and I had a couple of lamb tagines. But in the UK, I find meat-free is really easy. Dairy-free is a bit more of a challenge. So, but most of the time I'm in essence vegan. But that's a whole nother.
Why did you do that?
Health predominantly, I guess. I did some learning. It's I had a malignant mole in my arm so that needed to be cut out. So in essence, a cancerous mole. And it made me just start looking into health and fitness a little bit more and kind of, cancer and tumours and stuff. So I went on a bit of a journey where I just, I love learning anyway. Yeah. But also in my role running a restaurant. Yeah, it was really went on for about 4 months. I read a load of books, watched a load of movies, and bearing in mind that, I was pretty anti-vegan, the complaints, and I still am, to be fair. I think vegans do a disservice to the healthy eating market. Yes. I think the whole kind of plant-based health and environmental benefits and the benefits of planet Earth are fascinating. And I don't think you're ever going to stop people eating meat by telling them not to. What you've got to do is create a really nice alternative. And that's what's really changed. And I'm sure Cara's doing that, is that, provide really, really good, interesting plant-based food
options,
where it's no longer a compromise and it doesn't feel like you're missing out. I think the first kind of black bean, rice, kind of beetroot, spiced veggie burger that I ate. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I would naturally have just gone for the cheese, bacon and steak burger every time, but I had this vegan one and I was like, wow, that's actually the flavors of that, the texture of that, really, really beautiful.
You do kind of feel better after. You don't get a slump.
Yeah, really
one
good.
Thing I noticed.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might compromise a tiny bit on that experience of the real dirty burger, but afterwards I feel so much better for not having had because even now we'll every now and then we'll go down to Five Guys or something for Five Guys with a few of us on a Friday. And the hour or two afterwards, I'm asleep. I'm on my arse. I regret it so much just for that few minutes of eating something real greasy and nice. I feel terrible for a couple of hours. I think, why do I bloody do this?
It's weird. I would never believe that. I sell predominantly meat and fish restaurant. Burgers, our biggest selling item. I would never have believed that I would even have tried it, but to try it and to enjoy it so much, and I've been introduced to so much kind of new and interesting food. And then I know it's recovery time, so I do quite a lot of cycling. And my recovery time, and I'd read a bit about this when I was doing my research about the fact that you kind of muscle soreness and recovery after intense exercise. So, I went out and did it wasn't a huge amount. It would be for some people, but I rode about 70 miles one day. And I remember coming down the following morning and seeing my wife in the kitchen and saying, oh my God, I've literally got no muscle pain whatsoever. There might be something in this. That's ridiculous, I've had friends who's very similar.
It runs a lot of marathons, eating meat his whole life, super fit guy. So they switched to vegan as a family, and he is so lean now. He's always been real chunky. He was a bodybuilder when we were young. He was like under 18s champion or something. I mean, he's really into it, and he's always stayed pretty hench, but very, very fit, loads of sports. He's always been quite stocky. Switched to vegan. That was the only switch he made. Lean as he looks like a different guy. But he said the same. He started running. He said he can run further, way further, and his recovery time is half the time. Like he said, marathon running, he can literally run a half marathon and the next day feels fine to go out for a jog. Yeah.
I'm utterly convinced that there is a inevitability now about people go into a more plant-based diet. I don't think it will be all the time for everybody like you. It'll be a predominantly plant-based because of the the environmental impact. There's just not enough land on Earth for everybody to carry on eating as much beef. And it's actually helped me quite a lot. I'm way more relaxed about it now than I was, because I'm kind of like, it used to just annoy me. Now we've got whole plant-based sections on the menus at all of our restaurants. And
how do they perform at the restaurants?
Good. Yeah, not still. There's nothing beats the burger. Even if you put a lovely sea bass on, or a nice kind of steak, or risotto, whatever. Burger's still the biggest selling item. But again, just noticing the difference in popularity now compared to 2 years ago. Yeah, whereas before putting it on the menu would have been a bit of a pain, because you just from a kind of wastage and freshness and throwing it away and all that kind of stuff. Good. The challenge actually is getting the chefs, because chefs have got, quite often the classic kind of French training, lots of butter, lots of cream, lots of sauces.
They've got to think outside the box now.
And I'm looking forward to it catching up. I think the consumer's there, but I don't think, and there are some chefs, chefs, and it's like Cara. But I think it's going to be some time before it's.
I think
easy.
this is where these guys are trying to step in. You need to give them a shout.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think
they're trying to create. I think where they're hoping to go is to create some ranges of stuff that they can sell to restaurants where the chefs aren't creating amazing vegan food, so they can kind of back that up, because a lot of it's so prep intensive.
Yeah.
They can get that done and provide the raw ingredients to make a really good vegan option and sort of fulfill that into places, because there aren't enough chefs who know how to do it.
And I will say for my senior chefs, they're actually enjoying the challenge, because I think, like me, they love to learn. When I started doing it, learning about all these different pulses and nuts and the old kind of grains and all the stuff that I just never really cooked with. And it got me back into cooking again, because having a brigade of chefs means that I don't need to cook very often. And I got quite lazy with it. But having a team of chefs who don't use those ingredients meant I needed to learn it. And then when I started chatting to the chefs and introducing them to some new ingredients, they were like, wow, this is really interesting. So actually, although they're not there yet, they're enjoying the journey of learning, because it's new to them.
It must get boring selling the same. And we experienced it with chefs over the years, where you take on a new chef, he's worked at a ton of places, but he has a kind of repertoire. And so they'd slip into the cafe environment and they'd want to put on lamb shank burger, and we'd be like, well, this is a cafe with avocado on toast and light, vibrant salads and soups. Yeah. And then the breakfast range.
Eggs Royale and Eggs Benedict.
Yeah, it's a different style of food, but they continually always try and slip back into the dishes that don't really suit the cafe. Cafe vibe.
Interesting times. I could probably spend the next 45 minutes just chatting about that whole movement and the difference and my opinion on it. We'll do a special plant-powered episode one day. But just finishing off on here, so you've got the roastery, you've got the vegan food.
Yeah, and then we've got a craft brewery,
nice.
who again is someone we know from years back, actually a friend, but he went up to Scotland, worked in craft breweries for a long time, and came back, started in his mum's garage with a friend, brewing up some beer that tasted good. And this is their first leap beyond that into having their own brewery. So,
what's the name?
Barefaced Brewing from Wimborne, but now obviously in Bournemouth town centre.
Great.
But they got their first few batches out in the last month pre-Christmas. So they got barrels on at a few bars and stuff. They got bottles for sale, and they're doing a couple of events up to Christmas, and I think they're going to full production from January. So
great, we'll have to try it. I was with Steve from 8 Arch in Wimborne, funny enough, a couple of weeks ago. So
they know those guys well. Yeah,
perfect. No, I'll have to try the beer. We're already trying a glass of wine and a CBD coffee while we're sat here. So whether we can get some more, we'll get the beers on. But
it is lunchtime.
It is lunchtime, and I have got a busy afternoon, so maybe we'll do the beer another day. So okay, cool. And then can you just talk me? So I knew you back in your what was it, Boogaloo originally, Bosca Nova days. Just talk about that transition, because you set those up from scratch, I think, back in 10 years ago, was it?
2007, I think we opened Bosca Nova. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 10, 11 years ago. Yeah, so Bosca Nova was just born out of frustration from, I've always worked in hospitality, and always in independence, because chains didn't really exist when I was a kid, I guess, or you didn't see them as much. So I washed up at a ton of restaurants. I can never remember a chain existing back then. And particularly the first restaurant I washed up in was just the most vibrant, buzzing restaurant. It finished, they had a piano hoisted up. It was in an old church. A piano was sat on the wall, like 20 foot high, and they hoisted him up in like a crane seat. And this guy, Matt Black, used to play honky tonk, swinging around up there, down in tequilas. And by the end of the night, everyone was on the tables and stuff. It'd just get raucous. It was Mexican food, and it just get raucous, run by a real character in Lymington. And to me, that was the bar for restaurants. And over the years, they kind of got a lot calmer and tamer, and chains. Formulaic, yeah, good word. And working abroad a lot, cafes kind of came to me as an option, because I never wanted to be a restaurateur, because the lifestyle, the hours, I could always see, it's not great. I didn't know many restaurateurs. You've managed it well, but I didn't know many restaurateurs with a good family life. Yeah. It's a tough industry in that respect, and family was important to me. So while I wanted to do it, I didn't know how to do it and still have the lifestyle I wanted. So traveling, I saw tons of amazing cafes, really busy. I was like, you don't have this in England. We've got greasy spoons, we've got pubs, and we've got restaurants, which I'd class as kind of high commitment. Pubs are pubs. Yeah, they were still smoky back then. And cafes were very much greasy spoon. I was like, where do you go if you want low commitment dining and very fresh, healthy food? I might want to sit there all day, not doing much, or I might want to come for a meal with my family. Where does that sit in England? And it didn't, but California, Australia, really common. So it was an overwhelming drive to fulfill a gap in the market. Like we could do something totally different here.
And what do you mean by low commitment dining? I've not heard that. I quite like that. I wish I could do a low commitment restaurant.
There was, it's not really so common now because it's so popular, but back 11 years ago, low commitment dining to me was you don't have to book a table. You're not taking up a space. When you go to a restaurant, it's kind of a high commitment. You're taking one of their tables. They go sit you at a table, particularly back then, or you'd often have to book, even at lunchtimes. So low commitment dining is more that you just turn up and maybe eat for 10 minutes, maybe sit there for 3 hours. There's no...
I love that. I think
drop
that's
in, drop out.
Indicative of how laid back you are. The fact that actually a restaurant booking was the highest level of commitment you could do. It's like, what, two hours? It's like, no, I can't.
Well, I can't commit to that.
No. Have you got a mobile phone?
It was something I just felt was missing. Really good, fresh produce from interesting food, but light meals. And it took a while to find our feet with how we did it. It was busy straight away because it looked different. We built everything out of junk we found. And it was colourful, it was vibrant, it was full of junk. The staff were kind of the same. And the menu was kind of crazy. But 11 years ago, it was easy. People didn't know what halloumi was. They didn't know what granola was. I grew up with hummus, so it was always obvious to me. But the amount of people who asked me what hummus was, I was really? Like, wow. Yeah. But some of the other stuff, more common. Halloumi wasn't well known back then. Things that are very commonplace now. It was kind of easy back then to create a really unique menu. I would hate to try and do it now with Instagram and the way things... but also the cafe sector's vibrant now, the fast, low commitment dining sector. Grab and goes, quick turnaround places. It's vibrant and full, and I don't know where I'd find a niche. If I had to do it all again, I don't know where I'd find that niche now.
Was that part of the decision then? So how long did you run that for, and what was the decision in closing it or selling it?
We sold it just 6 months ago. I'd lost the passion. Still loved the place. The place is still vibrant and doing really well. But I was too busy with other projects like this warehouse is taking up every penny and every moment. And you can't be in too many places at one time. And the cafe was never quite as good as I wanted it. It was doing really well, but I felt like it was declining slowly. And I didn't want to see that. So selling it to new owners who were bringing back that passion I had 10 years ago has been a real pleasure, actually, because I'm watching it now and it's got a real buzz when I go in there, like much more of a buzz than it had in the last couple of years of me owning it. So it's kind of been nice to almost pass it on. They're running it very much the same. They've just tweaked everything, tuned everything. It's just got that love that you can see they really give a shit.
Yeah, that's interesting, I think, because I think it's very easy. Well, it's actually very hard to sell places that you've created and that you've put all that time and effort into, and to move on to it, and not to judge yourself as failing in the fact that you can't make it work and do new projects. Yeah,
I was just aware of doing too many things not very well, and I was at the point in my life where I was like, I want to do less things and do them a lot better, and my passion's in this, not in the cafe anymore. So I'd got to the point it was an obvious choice. I actually think I could have sold it 2 years ago. Would probably have been just as good a time or better time to have sold it. But again, it was making that, it's like your baby. I can still remember literally bleeding, cutting myself doing the refit and working. I think I did 48 hours straight there one time. I worked through the nights just trying to get it ready to open. And that memory is like yesterday. So there was a real wrench and letting it go like, this is one of my children.
No, I think it's incredible. And I feel the same with my venues as we've added a few more, and I'm a little bit guilty of the kind of, shiny new toy and moving on to the next project, but also it's such an evolving sector. The stuff you talk about how different or how much easier it was 11 years ago, although it's easy now in the fact that people know the food and actually people are quite happy to go into those little independents. What they are is very fickle. They move on so quickly. It's very easy for somewhere else to open, set up an Instagram account, pop some nice photos on, and all of a sudden you're like, hang on, where's everybody gone? They've all gone to the new place. That speed of information, I think,
it's a tough market now, and very faddy, I think, with if someone cool posts an Instagram picture of whatever,
an influencer,
and then suddenly everyone's making that same dish and suddenly it's on everywhere and you've lost your USP. And that faddiness, things come and go so quickly at the moment. Everyone's chasing those fads customer wise, and I think that makes it very hard as an operator to stand out. You almost need to just stick to, we do this. And stand by it and let the fads come and go, I guess.
Yeah, okay. I think, hats off for being brave enough to go, okay, I've done my thing there. It's changed. I'm going to do something else. What made you decide roasting coffee then?
Whoa, roasting was, I it was always a goal, actually. As soon as I got into coffee, I got obsessed with coffee and how do you make it better? Because I came back to England from a lot of time abroad and I was like, wow, our coffee is bad. And then opening the cafe, my prime goal wasn't coffee. I wanted to do really good coffee, but my goal was more service-based. It was more, I want brilliant food and brilliant coffee, but served to you by someone who gives a shit, who's got a smile on their face, who's going to think about you and what you're having. And are you going to have a nice time while you're in here? That was more the prime goal. And I still actually believe service does trump everything else. Good service trumps product. Great product with bad service leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Agreed.
So that was the prime goal. But then I was lucky enough with my first coffee training, which was provided free by the machine supplier, I think, or the coffee supplier. I can't remember. But we had a great coffee supplier. And they had this brilliant Kiwi guy who was passionate about independence. So he got them some huge contracts, but he was also... independence was where he's at. Yeah, and New Zealand, Australian coffee was a light years ahead of us back then. And he sold us a machine for far more than it was worth on a lease deal. Bastard. but it came with the training package. So we went on this training course. And just as luck would have it, a guy, James Hoffman, who runs Square Mile Coffee, he's like one of the top people in coffee in the world. But it was just before he won the World Barista Championships and started Square Mile and became such a sort of coffee legend, he was still doing training courses for La Spaziale. So we had him do our training course.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he just made me this coffee that literally blew my socks off. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be happy till our coffee tastes that good. Because I was like, if it can taste this good, then that's what I want. So it was then just a never ending challenge to make the coffee taste better all the time. And it was just such a journey of trying to find, again, you didn't have that access to information. So back then you could only really buy a coffee that was Brazilian. You didn't know what farm it was from, let alone what process it was or what varietal of bean it was or any of this information. That came 2 or 3 years later. So it was just this constant, and it still is a constant chase because it's an evolving product. It's a natural product. It's never the same. So it's a kind of chasing your tail, but you get stuck eventually with, you can only do as a barista what you can do with the coffee that's given to you by the roaster. So you then end up moving roasters to a different roaster who's providing a slightly different style of coffee. So maybe I want to drink lighter roasted coffee. My roaster doesn't do it. So I moved to another roaster. Some roasters, the coffee was great, but Union Hand Roasted, brilliant company, great ethics, lovely coffee. But they started supplying supermarkets in quite a big way. And that just made it very difficult as an independent to justify the price. So if someone can then put a price on it, well, I can buy this coffee from the supermarket and make it myself for 45p a cup. It makes it very difficult to stay independent. So we left them purely for that reason.
Really? Purely that reason? Or did it upset you that somebody's gone and sort of, gone out to the big guys and supplying at such a large level?
It didn't bother me because so much of the coffee industry is really crap and it's run by shysters and commodity dealers and it's really bad product. And a lot of it, they hang their hat on, it's got a fair trade certificate, but it tastes like crap. Yeah, and they're just charging you more because it's got fair trade. And the fair trade price is actually very low. It's not encouraging these farmers to grow better coffee and sell it for 3 times the amount. It's just locked them in at a bad price forever.
Yeah, I'd love to touch on that because we get asked all the time, why don't you sell fair trade coffee? And you're
because it doesn't work in coffee. Yeah, it's not a good...
it's kind of like a minimum, it should never be worse than that, but it's such a low kind of base point, isn't it? And we can do so much better.
The problem, as I'm aware, and I'm real happy for someone to update me on my knowledge with this because it's out of date, but from what I learned years back was that it's fair trade in coffee hadn't worked well. It's worked incredibly well in other industries, but in coffee it hadn't. And what it was doing was holding the farmers to a price. But that was all they then ever achieved. And then there was no emphasis on quality because they were getting the fair trade price. So it kind of locked farms at a level, whereas other farmers that were selling via the Cup of Excellence or selling direct, working with roasters, they were encouraged to increase quality and the value they got for their beans went up 3, 4, 5, 10 times fair trade price as potential.
And still,
but they're encouraged to make the coffee better, which fair trade to me should be all the way down to you come into my cafe and you pay me more for a cup of coffee because it's got the fair trade logo on. It should taste better. It should taste good. It shouldn't taste crap. That's not fair trade at that final point. Whereas farmers grow better quality coffee, get massively more money for the farmers, and then you end up with a much better cup of coffee all the way. Everyone gets a fair trade. And to me, that's how it should work. And it doesn't in coffee. So we still by chance, some coffee we buy has fair trade, but we will never buy a coffee just because it's fair trade if it doesn't taste good. Because
the aspects of, if the coffee farmer's actually getting more than fair trade, then his kind of impact on the environment and how he looks after his team and water use and where it's grown, all of that presumably you still look into.
We work with importers who look into it on our behalf, so it's impractical really to go direct to farms, although if you look on Instagram, a lot of roasters make it look like that happens, but it really, direct trade is a phenomenally hard thing. You're working with sometimes cooperatives of tiny farms up in the mountains in Ethiopia, and you've got to negotiate. I've heard stories before of roasters who have worked direct with farms for 2 or 3 years, buying their coffee even though the quality wasn't great, but then the money they had committed was then put into investment in processing methods. The quality's gone up. Same again the next year, and they've got this coffee's got really good. And then a middleman, as there's a lot in coffee, has come along and said, well, we'll give you this much. And they've gone to buy the lot the next year, and the farmer said, oh, it's all sold. And so the direct trade model is incredibly difficult. And unless you're feet on the ground in those growing regions, I wouldn't like to even... we try not to bullshit our Instagram account with pictures of me playing the big white Jesus next to a couple of farmers. Look at me saving these guys. We try and keep our ethics based more on back here, and then we rely on our importer to make sure they're buying really good quality coffee from farms that are trading ethically.
Okay, and they can prove that. You have the conversation, you work closely with them.
But we completely outsource that side, and we don't pretend to do that ourselves either. That's their speciality, and we make sure we're buying coffee that we're happy with where it's come from.
Okay, so just going back to the story, so you moving out of the cafes because fundamentally you couldn't find anybody that was sort of selling you the coffee that you wanted once the guys had gone to the supermarkets. That's when you. Yeah.
So for those guys, I was actually glad they're selling amazing coffee to supermarkets because it's raising the coffee standards. We're in a unique situation with coffee where the specialty market, coffee in general, has boomed. I mean, it's just gone enormous. But 95% of it still, I'm making that figure up, but I'm going to guess 95% of it is still commodity bought, traded, pretty bad coffee. But the specialty sector just grows with the commodity sector. So every time a Starbucks opens up, there's more room for specialty customers. The more people start drinking coffee at Starbucks and Costa, the more of their customers are going to start looking for, what's a better cup of coffee sort of thing. So our sector just grows with so you can't slate Starbucks and Costa if you're in specialty coffee, because what they've done for our end of the industry has been phenomenal. So we just grow with them. So putting good quality coffee into a supermarket, I think is great. It's giving consumers knowledge, and it's supporting farms because they trade very ethically, Union. It just meant we couldn't differentiate ourselves as a true independent cafe when you can buy our products in the supermarkets. It didn't look right. It didn't feel right for me.
Okay.
I don't know how you found it, but we used to have customers come in, particularly we're in Boscombe, it's a unique place, but customers are coming in and go, £1.50 for a cup of tea, I can buy a tea bag for 10p.
Correct.
And you want to say, well, go home, make your own tea, wash your own cup up.
Yeah, that lack of appreciation of where the money goes is mind-blowing. It's
because there's that direct correlation between the cost of a tea bag. So unless you sell loose leaf tea made in a pot and make it different, there's always that correlation back to how much does it cost. And that's why as soon as the coffee was in the supermarket, there's a correlation back. So we had to step away from Union, which was a shame because I love their coffee, but also not a bad move. We would have moved anyway at some point just because we want to try different coffees. As a barista, you get bored. I don't want to just... Union coffees, I don't know about now, but back then all tasted like Union coffees. So they had a range of single origins and blends. But we used to do the tasting on the Great Taste Awards for the espresso, and they didn't used to mix the beans all that well. So they'd just be in the order they got sent in, and you could tell when you hit the Union coffees, it's all blind tasted, but you'd have 5 or 6 that you absolutely had that signature of Union coffee on them. So again, we would have moved just because we want to try a different style of roasting.
Okay.
We bought 2 identical coffees from 2 different roasters before we've noticed they've had the same lot from the same farm on their list at the same time. And we've bought those and they'll taste different just because they've been roasted differently. So we kept moving for those reasons, really. But eventually you get to the point where if we can't manipulate the flavours the way we want to, we're always playing with someone else's roast. So it was a natural progression if you're chasing the best cup of coffee.
So when was the first time you started roasting your own then?
Yeah. Production, like using our own coffee, was about 4 years ago. We'd messed around with roasting for quite a long time before, like gone and used other people's roasters and played around with it, tried to roast lots that we could sell in the cafe. It was never really good enough, but there was so much more to it than I'd realised. we bought a roaster 7 years ago, but didn't get it plumbed in or working. We just got a really good deal on a second-hand one. I got overexcited, bought it, had nowhere to put it.
Another thing you ended up with.
Yeah, interesting about that. We'd opened South Coast Roast in Bournemouth. So from Boscanova, we'd decided so many people said we need good coffee in Bournemouth. There needs to be good coffee in Bournemouth. At the time, there were very few quality-focused venues in Bournemouth. So I had a real concern over, do people want this? But eventually we took the leap. We needed to grow. We were kind of stuck as one cafe. We kept losing good staff because there was no progression. We also ran on 2.5 chefs, and it's really hard to find a half chef. So that allowed us to have 3 full-time chefs, which was better. So we opened, and we called it South Coast Roast because, we were getting into roasting coffee and we work on the South Coast. It sounded like a good name. And we were just inundated with people asking, is it beef or pork? Like 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, what's the roast? Brilliant. And then going, oh, coffee.
No way, really.
And it's that classic, you're stuck in your own business. And to us, roast means coffee.
Absolutely. Yeah,
everyone else in England, roast means dinner.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So it's a terrible name, really, really bad name. It now doesn't matter because it's got its reputation, but for day one, awful choice. Just a silly mistake. So we plonked the roaster that we had nowhere to put in the window, and that solved that straight away. So it never actually worked while it was sat there, but people realised instantly it's coffee roast. So.
Right. So where does the name Bad Hand come from then?
It doesn't really. I'm just fed up with naming places. Right. It doesn't make a difference.
It doesn't sound like a roast dinner.
No.
Yeah. Maybe a card game.
Yeah. It's 2 reasons. One, it's a kind of ugly name. It's jarring. It's really a bad choice of name. Bad Hand, because it's hand roasted coffee. So Bad Hand roasted coffee. It's a really crap name, and it's quite jarring. And the logo can be really, and people remember that.
Right. Brilliant.
So it really sticks in people's minds. And secondly, I knew a guy called Bad Hand, who was a Native American who I worked with in Colorado. He was kind of crazy actually, but a real sound guy. And I just remember being introduced to him, and he was introduced to about 3 or 4 of us, and there was like Dave, Simon, Joe, and he goes, Bad Hand. I was like, fuck, that is a cool name. I was like, I'm Joe. I was like, what? Yeah. I was like, I'm never going to get to be called Bad Hand. It's not like I can't get away with changing my name to that. My mates will devastate me if I say, actually, I'd like to be known as Bad Hand from now on. So I sort of always had this secret urge to call something Bad Hand. I couldn't inflict it on any of my children. So
right.
In desperation for any other name, it was like, Bad Hand. Yeah.
Amazing. You're right. It does stand out now. And not only have you, you've not named one of your kids, but it is about sort of 20 foot high on the outside of the building as you walk through town, isn't it? So,
can't miss it.
Yeah, probably even more
We're on
fun.
such a back street. It was kind of like, this will be a real cheeky, everyone will see it at least.
It looks really good. So Bad Hand actual roasting, what's that, a couple of years now or less than that?
Yeah, well, we only officially switched name after we sold South Coast Roast, the cafe, because obviously both cafes were sold with their names because they had a great reputation. So the people buying them wanted to keep running it, the same. Make tweaks, changes, and improvements, but maintain it as the same venue. There's no change. So we had to change our name anyway. And South Coast Roast Coffee Roasters was a crap name. So we've kind of been operating as Bad Hand officially for only a year, but we've been roasting separately from the cafe for a couple of years.
Okay. Miss anything from the cafe side, or are you glad you've just gone to almost back a house, I suppose, in the hospitality sector?
Yeah, do you know what? I don't. I miss the initial buzz from years ago, but I recognise you can't get that back.
Yeah.
And I also don't have the urge to open venues anymore because I don't know what I would. There's not that niche. There's not that something missing. With roasting, to me, there's something missing. Yeah, most venues buy coffee either as a complete commodity afterthought. They just order from their food supplier whatever coffee they've got. It's either price driven and they literally don't care, or they're buying something from a roaster they might have heard of or drunk somewhere and thought, the branding's good or like the taste of it. But then once you've bought that coffee, it tends to be just then delivered by courier in packets that are non-biodegradable in any way or non-recyclable. And you don't really get service or support with it. You can book in training, but it's hard. If you have breakdowns, they're a long way away. The facilities are all there, but in reality, the service isn't really there to back it up. Whereas we felt, we can roast for you per week to order. We can flex up, down. We can change your roast for you. We can be there. If you call us with a breakdown, we can be there really bloody quick. We can also advise, because we've run cafes on so long, we can give a lot of advice, particularly more so with the startups than with someone like you who's been operating a long time. But with a startup, you can be very helpful with just some small layout changes, staffing changes, menu changes. We've had customers with huge bloated coffee menus that we can strip down to just a 5-item menu, and their customers love it. And service speed's rapid and life gets easier. So we can give all those years of experience running cafes to our coffee customers. And training is basically on tap up at the roastery. You can book in. It's almost never we can't fit you in within the next couple of days and get some training done for staff as it turns over. So our aim again with the roastery is service based as our priority is, can we give that service? We always tried to at Boscan Over and South Coast, and we always had problems along the way, but that was our aim. And I think we overarchingly achieved a better quality of service than most cafe competitors on the high street. And that's our aim with the roastery. So there's brilliant roasters in the UK, but if they give better service than I do in Bournemouth and they're based in London, then I'm doing something heinously wrong and need to up my game.
Yeah, makes sense.
No one should be able to outserve us.
Yeah, no, good. And then you mentioned that actually roasting coffee is harder. When you first tried it, it was challenging and the coffee was fundamentally a little bit shit. So what have you learned on that journey, and how do you now nail that beautiful kind of coffee?
Heather and Luke.
Delegation.
We have Heather and Luke, who are both coffee geniuses. I've got a massive passion for coffee, but my skill isn't at the right level.
So Heather's your roaster for those guys.
Yeah, Heather's our head roaster. Luke's was our sort of head barista, head of coffee, and was our roaster at the beginning. Interestingly, worked for Conquer Gin for a few years, who I know you've done a podcast with. Yeah. Missed coffee, and so is back with us now, sort of doing all the training, looking after customers. But between the two of those guys, their palate is just better than mine. I've got a good vision of what I think will sell. Like, I think what's missing, coffee roasting went too light, too fruity, too floral. It was very popular, but I didn't see customers loving it. So we've taken our roasting a bit more old school at the moment, and the feedback's been phenomenal. So I've got more of that kind of view on coffee. But when it comes to actually making the coffee taste amazing, choosing the right beans in the first place and then roasting them correctly, then
nice.
I found it's better to employ someone who's better at it than I am.
Yeah. So how about the other aspect apart from great coffee? You're renowned for your environmental impact and the details that you go to, literally down to packaging to delivery. Does that come from you?
All of us, actually. I think from me and my wife have got a huge passion for it, and I think you end up attracting people who work with you who have similar ethics, I guess, along the way. So we've kind of ended up with a whole load of us who do care. But I get more belligerent about it as I get older. Right. Okay. But I've got to say my team are just as good at staying on it. When I'm being lazy one day, they'll say, "Hey,
so
wrong bin."
What's been some of the biggest challenges or some of the stuff you've achieved that others just have kind of given up and gone, that's too hard?
I don't know if any of it's really a challenge. It's just a case of thinking about it. I don't know if it would be any easier or cheaper for us to buy standard coffee packets and pack kilo bags.
What do you use at the moment?
Reusable tubs. We were using metal ones because we'd rather that than plastic, but actually they don't last. There's too many problems with using the metal ones, so we've actually gone with plastic ones. But the original plastic ones we bought, we've had nearly 3 years of use out of. So I weigh up against the plastic that we get good use, and then we can recycle the plastic we use. And because we're in charge of those buckets, they come back to us. We can make sure they're recycled. So at the moment, a combination of metal and plastic tubs, but they're heavy duty, reusable. Worst problem is people like your chefs love them, right? So they end up in the kitchen, but they're being reused.
I was going to say they'll use them for a long time.
They're being used and used for a long time. So, but the standard is to put into like a foil or plastic lined packet, vacuum sealed, then pack into a box and then send by a courier. We put into reusable, which we take back and sanitize. Then we deliver 90%, I'd say, by bicycle.
That's impressive.
Hideous weather, we'll take the van out. But Heather will cycle a long way, Wimborne, which is like, 10 12 miles? Yeah, in some pretty bad rainy conditions.
Really? That's quite a commitment, not just from it's a great environmental commitment, from a time commitment though. Yeah. Great fitness. But
the time commitment's hard. But again, I'm happy my staff are out doing different things. We want our roasters going to do deliveries because they can taste the coffee. So the roasting team deliver the coffee. If we deliver by bike, it keeps us fit and healthy. It keeps the impact down. But from a financial point of view, we don't have to run a delivery van and insure that and MOT it and deal with breakdowns on it. So I'm not even sure there is a bigger cost in doing it the way we do it. Potentially the staff cost will outweigh it, but a lot of our deliveries are faster on bike. Even Wimborne, same time on bike as it is by van. By the time I found parking, paid for parking, then walked to the cafe and walked back to the parking, and then had some terrible traffic, we can often get there and back on the bike in exactly the same time. So I'm not even sure the labour cost is higher. So yeah, I don't always see it as a challenge. I see it as just sensible, really.
And you've deliberately made that choice that you know, most people would obviously see the bicycle as a limit from a geography perspective of how far you can deliver.
Yeah.
But you've consciously said, I only want to deliver in essence within a bike's ride.
I can't maintain the level of service we'd like to give and that we're aiming to give. We don't always hit it, but what we're trying to get to, I can't maintain it if we go beyond those boundaries. So we deliver to a couple of places we can't get to by bike, but it's because one of us lives there, so you can take it in your van, so we can still look after those people. I wouldn't take on a customer in London, and I wouldn't take on, at the moment, I wouldn't take on a customer even as far as Southampton, because it's too far for us to genuinely be able to look after them and make sure the coffee tastes right as well. So.
Okay, so if you can nail the service side of the business, you'll expand beyond Bournemouth, would you say? Or?
I don't know. No? At the moment, I don't know. Our roaster has capacity to do 4 times the volume we're doing, but we don't have capacity to look after 4 times the volume of customers in the way we'd like to. So we need to explore other avenues for, can we roast coffee for offices? We're in talks with Lush about roasting the coffee for their products. So that would be just a tolling cost. They'd provide us the beans. We'd just do a roast cost. Then again, they're keeping it more local. And we won't take on any extra customers to look after. So it could be a large volume of coffee without any extra customers. The worst situation for us is taking on the fun customers, which are the small startup cafes. And they're the ones we like doing. But everyone you pick up involves a huge amount of equipment and setup and training and problems backwards and forwards over quite a long period before they just settle into pretty much maintaining themselves with a little bit of training here and there. So they're the ones we like doing, but we physically, if we doubled now, all with small independent cafes, we wouldn't be able to maintain the service. So we need a mixture of maybe some white label roasting for companies that we're happy to roast for and their ethics are okay. Then Bad Hand supplying independent places around the Bournemouth area. And then we look selling online. Now we've got these packets that are fully omni-degradable and have no impact on the environment. We've started selling online as well.
Okay. And are you starting to get a take up of that outside of the town?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Not massively outside. It's early days. We've only been going a month. But yeah, it's a nice little tick over and we haven't promoted yet, but that's an area we need to expand as well. Because again, we're selling direct to customer. We're getting them quality coffee and it's plastic free completely. It's omni-degradable packets, paper labels, paper envelopes. There's no plastic anywhere on it. So we feel good about sending that out.
Yeah, and that's a subscription base. So 6 week or 3 month subscription, I think it is.
You can do a one-off. And interestingly, you are one of many people who haven't realised that. So we're going to have a relook at the website in the new year because a lot of people don't realise you can just buy a packet.
Right. Okay. To be fair, that might have I just like the subscription model.
Yeah,
so
lots of people.
I look out for,
lots of people that have only noticed the subscription. So there's something we need to look at on the website too.
Now you mention it, I do remember there's a page with each individual product, but it was a brief look. But I personally love that subscription model. But I think it's also the collaboration. It's
once
amazing.
a week for 6 weeks is easy.
I love the fact you do a kind of roaster's choice. So I actually really like trying different coffees. So that opportunity not to have the same one every week.
And not to have to worry about picking it either. So for me, that's, I don't know if that's for every customer.
I thought you meant picking the beans then, but I get what you mean picking the coffee. I was like, I definitely don't want to be doing that. That's a big commitment.
But for me, that would be my job. I don't want to choose. My favourite restaurant is the one you walk in and they 100%. Say, you should try this. It's on the specials. And I'm the instant
same. I invariably, if I go into a restaurant, I say,
what's good?
What's good? What can I have? And if I go into a restaurant, particularly kind of, a Chinese and Asian and all that, where there's just so much stuff. And I'm like, look, can you just do a sharing platter for the table? There's 6 of us. Just bring out, here's the budget, bring out a load of food. And it's not that I'm being lazy. I genuinely don't want to look at all of that.
It's often a lovely way to eat as well. Just a surprise of nice food coming out the kitchen. It's got to be fun for the chefs as well. Right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. That collaboration you mentioned with Lush is great. I was with Conquer. He's just collaborated with the RNLI to do some charity stuff with his bottles. But I think we're lucky in this town that we've got some really interesting kind of brands, and Lush is a great example that now global, but they've done some good stuff. So if you can roast their coffee, that would be pretty awesome. You mentioned the the chains, and you were being very pleasant about the fact that actually the more Costas and the more Starbucks and places like that, then actually the speciality coffee can build around it. We've noticed it a little bit. There's been a resurgence in craft beer, but some of those big brewers now and some of the big pubs are getting pretty nifty at kind of rebranding themselves as the little guy. And you used to go into a pub that you knew was part of a chain of pubs, and it would have the same sign outside. And now they close for refurb, and 2 months later it opens, and you think normally until you try the food, you walk in and you go, oh great, this is a little, now an independent pub again. That's really good. And it looks like it, and it's nicely lit, and the branding's like a one-off, and then normally you order lunch and you go, oh, okay, right, this is all actually out of the packet and it's a bit shit. Do you worry whether the coffee kind of the big guys are going to do the same? Are they going to start investing in little kind of sub-brands and using
some
words
of them have actually, and it hasn't really taken off actually. There was it Harrison Hall was a kind of combination of Union Coffee, the guys that had Taylor Street Baristas, which was a fantastic sort of independently owned chain that really smashed it around London and moved a little bit outside of London, I think. And then I think they got slammed for getting funding through Tesco's for the project, but whether that's a bad thing or not, I kind of reserve judgment a bit. But as I went to try one out, but it just felt like a massive chain venue that's used all the tricks of being an independent. But it to me, they feel like someone's taken a tick list: exposed Brits, tattooed barista, funny shaped cups,
beard,
yeah, industrial lighting, lots of beards, and they've ticked all the boxes, but it doesn't have the passion. Yeah, it's not the same. But yeah, I think it will happen more and more. The chains get better and better at masking it. I think it's much harder in your industry than in cafes. I think the restaurant chains have got so much money behind them. The coffee chains work very much off their brand as it is, so there's no major benefit in them changing at the moment. They just grow.
The challenge in the restaurant sector is kind of the reason behind this podcast, really. But that domination by these huge, deep-pocketed venture capitalists who can operate at a loss for a long time, who just look at it as a unit growth. So they might have bought in, the VC might have bought in at 50 units, and they go, right, we're going to double to 100 units. If 20 of those units are loss-making in the mix, as long as it's brand awareness and others are making a good profit. But as the local independent who might be 20 meters away from that big chain restaurant, who's putting out vouchers and marketing and all that kind of stuff. And I do believe, everybody you speak to independently, the consumer will say, no, I'd much rather go to the independent. But in reality, when you ask them, where's the last place you went out for dinner, it's all too often
the voucher thing, I think, was a real problem. And I don't think independents should do it. I think they should stand by, this is my price for what I do because it's this. Because at one point it was a real downward spiral, even for the chains, I seem to remember. And again, this is just off a few conversations I had years ago, but the guy who was running the Café Rouge in Westbourne, and this is going back a few years, but he was saying to me, we've killed ourselves with vouchers. He said, because if we do a deal on a Wednesday, we're full. But then if we don't do a deal on a Friday and Pizza Express do, they're full. And everyone's full on their vouchers. So we're all full at half price. And then we're dead at full price. Yep. He said, it feels like we just shot ourselves in the foot. And I think that was a bad habit for restaurants pushed onto customers. And then customers got very used to the deals and all the deal websites. I don't think were good for the industry.
No, not at all. How we get out of that now, though, I don't know. It's become this because there's very few barriers to entry in the restaurant trade. So not so much for the big guys in the fact they've got to have their investment, but it's quite easy for them to get buildings and fit them out. But for the independents coming into it,
it's a big
you can open up
cost.
and then most of them are gone within 24 months. But for the kind of the long term guys who've invested maybe the bigger cash, less sort of pop-up orientated, it just makes it harder and harder and harder. So I'm optimistic because there's a lot of really passionate people. Most people you speak to love going to their local bar, going to their local restaurant, that kind of, everybody's got great memories of the clinking of kind of glasses when you walk into a kind of a bar and there might be a wood fire on and there might be somebody strumming a guitar. And you mentioned earlier, even now, the passion that, in your eyes, when you talk about that guy in the piano being hoisted up into the sky and playing 20, something 30 years later, it's so part of life for humanity that I really hope that lasts, and that formulaic, dull kind of greyness that you get in every bloody chain doesn't win.
I think it's coming back, but I think it's like vegan food. I think it's a massively growing thing, but it's still very niche. But more and more people are definitely looking for smaller, more independent things that are using interesting local produce. I think a lot of it's about getting customers to accept there's a risk involved. Do you know, if we're going to cook interesting, different food every day, we might not hit the nail every single time.
Yeah.
And if you're not charging extreme prices, then I think customers should be prepared to take that. Like, that wasn't your best meal, but the one I had last week was insane. So, and there's some excitement in that, I think, as well. Not always knowing, well, I'm going to try this craft beer. Do you know what? I might not like it.
Amazing. Yeah.
But do you know what? I might love that one. But I like the excitement of not knowing over I know exactly what a Heineken tastes like. And that's where I think, if people were more prepared to take those risks, you know what a Starbucks tastes like, but that independent cafe next door could be serving something stunning, or maybe not. But try it. It's one cup of coffee. Try it. You might have a really good experience.
Yeah, and I love that, and I love that a lot of people think that. But when we tried to do the craft beer bar, Jenkins and Sons, initially I was like, right, no multinational brands. We're only going to sell interesting British, no big chain kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we did it for 2 years. But the number of people that would walk in and go, I don't recognise any of these beers, and walk out. And the barman's job was kind of like, just try one. Yeah. Just try one. And they'd be trained. They're kind of like, what do you normally drink? I normally drink I drink a IPA Heineken. And we go, okay, cool. So it's like it's a premium, it's a 5%. Yeah. Or I'm trying to think, I drink a Beck's. Okay. So you're sort of like a session beer, 4%, quite light. Well, try this one. We've got Freedom 4, or we've got a Curious Brew. And they were trained to do it. In the end, I compromised and we put in Estrella. And I was like, right, now you can order one beer that you recognise. Okay. Yeah. But the barman's job still is to only allow you to have one of those, ideally.
Yeah.
And then use it and then kind of sell you the others and talk to you and get the conversation.
Because you can't just send people, you've got to give customers what they want still.
You're not here to kind of like, to patronise or to preach or to become too kind of stuck up your own arse. But it's not about that. It's kind of like, look, this guy that makes this beer is super passionate, super excited. He loves what he does. He understands the hops and I guarantee you that those big brands, chucking it out in the millions of litres in Europe, don't care as much of this bearded dude on his skateboard just down the road.
But also, where do you want to spend your money? That's what bothers me sometimes. I'm like, someone told me something that I'm going to get hideously wrong about, like silent revolution. If you're not happy with the way things are, stop spending money, because basically that's what's funding it all. If you bank with regular banks and shop at Tesco's and eat at chain places, all your money is going sort of back into the same system that maybe is the one you're not happy with. Yeah. So just stop spending your money there. Find an interesting place to bank that's got better ethics. Stop shopping at supermarkets all the time. Yeah, maybe do some of your shopping there, but if you can get it from local shops, start putting your money there rather than putting it straight back into the hedge funds that own the big...
100%.
Find the independent restaurants. Start thinking about where you put your money. So more for me, it's that I would rather go and support a small local brewery that's round the corner. I'd rather give him my money for beer than give it to, I don't even know who owns Heineken or Australia or all that, but I don't necessarily want to give that person my money. And that's where I think if people thought more about who am I supporting here? And there's a big problem with people not supporting small local businesses, as in, Kim Kardashian brings out a workout video, everyone, well, yeah, that's going to be amazing. Kanye West brings out some trainers. Oh, that'd be great. What the fuck does he know about trainers? Yes, he's going to have had a whole marketing team doing, but big brand people do things and it gets a lot of public support. But yet, you go and open a sandwich bar around the corner trying to serve like lunchtime fast sandwiches, better quality to someone else. Oh, that won't work.
Yes,
and very few people go, Mark's going to give that a go. Let's go and support you. We don't have that real mentality, I think, yet. But I think more people are caring, and I think if more people did really care and say, do you know what, we've got 5 or 6 really good beer brewers in this town, or we've got a couple of guys who roast coffee to a really high standard, or we've got umpteen really good independent restaurants where people are actually giving a shit. If they say, well, I'd like to give those people my money today.
That's what it's all about. There's a reason this is called the Humans of Hospitality podcast. Yeah. It's exactly the point. Summers. I'm just going to play you in the trailer on that little rant, because that is the whole point, is can we get people to consciously think that where they spend their money.
Where's my money ending up? Where they spend
their money. It's 100%,
Our big kicker through we were lucky at Boscanova. It wasn't judgment, it was luck. But the cafe sector really boomed during the recession. We'd just opened. 6 months later, we had the crash, then slipped into recession, and I was shitting bricks. But cafes really picked up in the fact that people stopped big expensive dinners because money was tight, but started maybe having a breakfast a bit more often. So we were sat in a very fortunate position there as a cafe anyway. But in particular, we looked at putting on a basics range because all the supermarkets were doing it, and we were like, Christ, people are really tight. Maybe we should do a jokey version, but like a basics range menu where we'll do like a slightly cheaper bacon
stripy packaging. And
we'll do like a tongue-in-cheek version. But and then we looked at our profits and we were making 1% profit. And it was like, why the hell am I going to sell stuff cheaper? I'm like, it's shit or bust now. We said we're going to use better quality products and we're going to put our prices up a bit because we're effectively going out of business anyway if we don't do better. So now's the time to take the leap. So we just went a bit early. We put the prices up a bit and we worked really hard on value for money. That was our overarching ethic, value for money. It doesn't matter if we're selling something for £1 or £10. It's got to present good value for money because people are starting to care. When the money's this tight, people care where they spend it. They don't want to spend £2 on a crap coffee. They'd rather spend £2.80 on a really, really good one where they get great service in an awesome building with some good music playing and someone remembers their name and says goodbye to them when they leave. And they'd rather spend that £2.80 with us than give £2 to like Wetherspoons over the road. We're doing coffee at, I think, £1.50 at the time, Lavazza coffee. And we were outselling them on coffee by like 100%.
Good.
And it was that value for money thing, though, that actually I think made the biggest difference. We were lucky people started using cafes a lot more anyway, but it was value for money. And that still now is, I think, where the independent sector can try and really concentrate on is, do I give someone really good value for money from the service, the atmosphere, to right when they leave, like everything about what they've been in here, did it represent good value for money? Do you feel good about giving us your money?
Yeah, no, it's good. So you're now, really busy. I know you've, you're growing kind of organically and you're being quite careful, like you say, about who you take on. With all that you've done and historically now having this building, do you ever feel overwhelmed? Does it ever kind of think, oh my God, what have I done? What have I created? And how do you manage that?
Getting rid of the cafes, selling the cafes has helped because it's just taken the stress off. We didn't sell them for masses of money because they're small independent cafes, one of them in Boscombe, which is very hard to find people who want to run a business in Boscombe, who want to also spend a lot on that business. They don't exist.
Just me.
Yeah, so I think we sold them both for a very, very fair price. So the money was swallowed up very quickly in the refit. That wasn't the big help. The big help was just being able to focus now on, okay, we're refitting this building and we're growing the roastery. And now we try and say no to almost everything else. So even event work, can you come and serve coffee at this event? Yeah, we've got a great guy, Bajan Brew Brothers, operates a mobile unit. Jack, he's a phenomenal barista, makes our coffee taste great, promotes it really well and does a lot of mobile stuff. So if mobile work comes our way, Jack does it. Right. We still get to sell him the beans, so we get benefit from it, but we're not scrambling around trying to make So I'm just trying to say no to a lot more.
I was going to say, that's what question I often ask is, what have you got better at saying no to? I think I've really learned on that entrepreneurial journey. You do, because you're like me, is that everything's interesting, isn't it? And
it's get too overexcited.
Yeah, it's like, shiny new thing or new contact, and you think, God, that's a really cool idea. I'd love to be involved in that. I'm still guilty of that. I still got way too much.
What about the family thing though? Because that's my hardest thing, is that I'm so busy here, but I live nearly an hour away, and so I spend a lot of time driving back and forward, and I never feel like I spend enough time focused on work or enough time focused on the family, and that's the hardest balance and what I'm aiming to redress over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, it is. It's a problem in the sector, isn't it? I mean, I'm quite lucky, I think, now that I've got a good team. But I look at some of my chefs and some of the managers, and you see how many hours they're working, and you see the impact it's having on relationship on their kids. And I thought, I never went into, I'm in hospitality because I love people and I love human relationship and I love family, and I want to create spaces where families can spend time with each other or business people. So the kind of the irony of that then having a negative impact on people behind the scenes is kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So it's easy with the senior team to just go, we're open 24/7. So basically I don't monitor your holiday. I don't monitor your hours. It's kind of like, work when you want. It's all about what we do. I know you're all grafters, and it's easier, but it's harder for, some people have just got to be there at 6 a.m. to prep. Some people have got to be there on a Sunday at 6 a.m. because you've got 200 people coming in
on a Saturday night in the kitchen.
You got people coming in for roast dinner. Yeah, the same guy that's kind of like, pumping out roast. We've got better at closing, so we're closed. The hotel's open on Christmas Day, but the other venues are now closed Christmas Day, mainly because I just used to feel so guilty about people working on Christmas Day. Yeah. I'd always pop in and say thank you and say hello, and I was like, wow, it's having an impact on my Christmas there. Christmas.
Many customers come out on Christmas Day.
I was always with
the cafe. I was like, I bet if we opened, it would be
the demand is there hugely. Not many places open. The chains are actually better now at opening than some of the independents. But I just can't. And
I've never thought myself to go out on Christmas Day, so that's why I never thought to open it in the early days. But as time went on, I was like, do you know what? It probably would be good, but we
could certainly do with the money
so,
because we've had some challenges. But we haven't done it. So, but no, family's tricky. But I think it's very much about a work-life blend rather than a work-life balance. You know, we blend it in together. You know, you can work on the phone. Things are happening at the weekend. My kids come with me, drop into the venues. Just before I came to you today, there was something going on at the school. You know, I'm lucky I can pop into the school for an hour, see the kids, kind of join in, make sure I'm there.
That's what I missed by having the hour separation from home.
Yeah,
so, my eldest son only lives with me half the time, so we live where he goes to school. My younger ones have only just started school, so I think when he's a bit older, we'd look to move this way because, again, the way I work is so flexible time-wise. If my family was close, I'd be able to very much pick up from school, do bedtime, come back and do a couple of hours in the roastery. You could blend it so nicely, I think, and all spend some real quality time together. But because I've got that physical drive at the moment, that's the one thing I dislike about my job.
Yeah, blend is the key. Your kids could be running. Yeah, they could be running around in here, no problem.
They love it
when
they so rarely get to come over, but when they come over, they absolutely love it.
It's a cool space. Thinking about other people coming into a sector, so I know we're very lucky that it's a constantly changing kind of sector that we're in. It's actually quite low barriers to entry. People can come in without a stupid amount of money or without a particular education, and I love that. I love the fact that back to the hipsters and the quirky people, we're full of people who love playing music and colouring in and using crayons and stuff like that. But do you ever hear any bad advice? Do you ever hear any kind of stuff that that you overhear business advice or people or the kids kind of coming up or people being told stuff, or did you hear stuff where you go, you know what, that's bollocks?
God, where do you start? I don't know, actually. I have a huge concern that so many people go in, particularly to the cafe sector, so blind to the finance. It's the margin in cafes is tight, much tighter than people realise. There's a real barrier to spending over a tenner, which we were talking about before this year. Yeah. We could put on stunning food at £10 and people would be like, in a cafe? No thanks. And so there's a real cap on what you can take in a cafe, and coffee's got the most hideous lack of pricing flexibility. So the worst coffee in the world, you might pay £2.40 for, and then you can go next door and buy one of the best coffees in the world for £3. There's such a small difference, but the cost of producing that quality coffee in terms of equipment and staff training and water filters and all the things you need to do to make that coffee good every single day is enormous. But people will happily pay just a few pence less for a crap one. So people don't realise how hard it is to make a living in a cafe, and they go into it without really having thought through what they're spending on their refits. So a lot of people would come to us. We did a bit of consultancy work for quite a long time, which I try and do less of now because I get too overexcited about other people's businesses while mine are collapsing behind me without me noticing. But it was really rewarding with the startups because they'd come to us. One person came to us with £160,000 budget to do up a small cafe, basically selling some paninis, a soup and some coffee. And I was like, you are kidding me. Like, I think we stripped it down to like 80,000. I wouldn't even have spent that much, but there was so much stuff we could just take straight out the mix, and they were getting oversold by people who were like, oh, you need all stainless steel in the kitchen and you need a new Altro floor down, and actually it had quarry tiles on the floor and hygiene proof walls anyway. The regulations just say clean wipeable surface, but a building contractor will come in and say, oh, I need extraction here and this there and this there. And people just get hugely oversold on what they think they need to open rather than just make it nice, make it work, get it open and see how you're getting on.
No, I agree. 100%.
I think it's sometimes a better, I think less places would close so quickly if they hadn't overcommitted so much to their finances. This is talking small cafe level.
No, I've learned that the hard way as well. I mean, a commercial fit out of a kitchen, easily 120 grand.
Yeah,
if you're doing a restaurant kitchen, just a couple of rational ovens is like, 12k, stick a range in, another 15.
It's huge money, isn't it?
Yeah. Refrigeration, walk-in fridge, 15k, like what? Extraction, 12k.
Yeah.
Like, hang on.
It just stacks up, doesn't it? Yeah.
And you're making like,
But at least in a restaurant, you're talking much bigger spend sort of thing.
But
Whereas
but
cafes,
the margin's still tiny,
Margin's tough,
Pence.
It is tough. I think that's one area people could almost do with a course on just basic finance for catering or hospitality for people before they go in, to really focus them on that a little bit. And most of the time when we've got customers who are struggling, who say, I can give us some help, I go and speak to them about, what percentage are you aiming for your staff to be of your turnover? Like, because we used to work off 30% staff, 30% cost of goods, 20% on overheads, and you're left with 20% of your turnover. Now, we never, ever hit that.
No, I've never hit that.
Bad times, we used to run between 1% and 4%. The best we ever did, we ran at 16% for one quarter, and we felt that. It was amazing. Cool. I felt like the richest guy in the world.
Yeah, nice.
Barely lift my hands for the gold watches and chains. But that was
3 months.
That was one quarter, and then it went back to, but staff cost is on the rise.
Hugely.
We used to always pay above minimum wage, and I don't know how cafes would afford to pay above minimum wage now it's gone up so much. Most people I know, it's 40% or more of their turnover. And then food costs just kept going up and up and up and up. And as I believe they kind of need to be sustainable, but the sale cost of the food hasn't gone up with the purchase cost of the raw ingredients. So your cost of goods is sitting around 40% at a lot of places, and then suddenly where's your 20%? It's just gone.
Well, I think you're seeing it nationally, and
it's
actually
a tough market for that, and the people entering into that, I think, aren't. Maybe that's the biggest area they need a short, sharp look. But at the same time, it's a passion killer. As soon as you start thinking about numbers, your creative brain closes up.
True. Yeah.
And suddenly
I was
you go,
we can't we can't end this hospitality on a downer. Much as I could spend the next 10 minutes talking about margins and price of food and price of staff and stuff like that, I would love to. It is, but you're right. It is. It's so important to get your head around those numbers. But let's end positively. What's next for Bad Hand? What do you see the sort of the future over the next couple of years? What's your thoughts?
For Bad Hand, we just want to keep doing what we do. I'd like to double the turnover we do, and then kind of pause and see. I've got 3 fantastic members of staff. They're the best people I've ever worked with, and they're all staff from us just being a roastery, and they're the best people I've ever had, and they're still with me now. So I feel really privileged to have that, and I don't want to grow unnecessarily. I want to take it to a point where the 4 of us can keep doing what we do, and push that to a level where we're happy, but it's not affecting our quality of life. We want to always look at more ethical ways of doing what we do. We'd like to start roasting a charity blender coffee, so something where literally 100% of profits is put back. So run that as a sort of side project, nice. Particularly to do with ocean conservation. So maybe team up with Sea Shepherd or someone like that and produce a coffee just for them that's sold on its own website, and we'd probably not do it as profits. We'd just do a percentage of sales. So it's a very fair number, because I think people can fudge, when people say, 10% of profits, and then, we didn't make any profits. So I think we'd do literally 50% of the sale price goes direct to ocean conservation, something like that. So try and springboard off it as we start doing better. Try and also use the brand to hopefully link up with other brands to try and get some reach to actually do some positive good as well. And then get this bloody warehouse finished, which is a good another couple of years. But
get it warmer.
It's going to be vibrant when it's full. We're going to have at least 8 or 9 businesses working out of here, all startups, all passionate people, mainly people working with their hands as well. I think the vibe's going to be fantastic. So get that finished, so it's a really great space for people to come and work and start businesses in.
You don't see it because you're here every day, I'm sure, but every time I come, it's always like, oh wow, you've got a bit more of a roof, or you've got another door, or you're really pushing the boat. Oh my god, you've got glass in the windows. So congratulations.
You
for what
don't
you've
see
done.
it when you're here every day. It's hard to see, but it's changing a lot, and I hope in a couple of years it'll be fully done.
Amazing. Right. Well, I could literally talk all day. We've already hugely overrun. So hopefully we can continue this conversation, maybe in a year's time. It's been great. Just where can people find out more if they want to find out more about you or the coffee? Where's the best place to go?
badhandcoffee.com. Head on there. We've got the subscription coffee. We also make a CBD infused cold brew coffee, which is, I think, the only thing that's kept me sane. Like when you're saying about like the pressures of work, CBD changed my life, keeps me much calmer. So we also do that, which is hightidecoldbrew.com. But there's information about the roastery and any feedback, email us. We're always looking to learn for ways to do better. We're looking for new people to work with that we can kind of agree with their ethics and they want to serve good coffee. So
amazing. Perfect. Well, look, thank you again so much for sparing the time. We're all super busy. It's massively appreciated, and we'll catch up again soon. Cheers, Joe.
Good luck with the podcast.
Thank you very much. Cheers. So there you have it, another week and another Humans of Hospitality episode recorded. Very much hope you enjoyed that conversation with Joe, and please do, as he says, check out his website, badhandcoffee.com. And if you are looking for some space and you're in the Bournemouth area, and as he says, it's probably a collective of hipsters, then go down and see him, check out the warehouse space he's got. Quite possibly your business would thrive working alongside Joe and the rest of the gang down there. We will now be releasing new episodes of the Humans of Hospitality podcast every single week. So please go to your, iTunes or podcast provider of choice. Click on subscribe and hopefully we will automatically appear in your feed. And as I said at the start, any feedback I do want to know. This is early days. I've been thinking about this project for probably about a year. Very excited to finally get on with it. Hope you will share the journey with me, but I would love your feedback. What works well for you? What works less well? What kind of episodes do you want? What length would you want? Any kind of subjects? People you'd like me to interview? Please get in touch at Mark Cribb via Twitter and Instagram, or go to humansofhospitality.co.uk website and find the links and more information on there. Okay, thank you so much. Hopefully I will be in your earpieces or on your stereos in a week's time. Thank you.